Welcome to the Erie Wellness Podcast, your go-to source for all things health, wellness, and living your best life right here in Erie. I'm your host, Lauren Brunetti, and I'm so excited to have you here. Each episode will dive into conversations with local experts and wellness professionals who are making an impact in the world of health and well-being. Before we jump in, be sure to like, share, and comment on this episode. We love hearing from you and seeing our community grow. Now let's get started. Welcome, everyone. Today on the Erie Wellness Podcast, I'm thrilled to welcome Dr. Antonio, one half of the powerhouse duo behind the Live Loud movement. He and his wife, Dr. Nichelle, are married chiropractors who are passionate about helping people move better, feel better, and live loud in their everyday lives. Dr. Antonio's journey started at the University of Colorado Boulder, where he studied integrative physiology and also where he met Dr. Nichelle. His mission is clear: to empower others through movement, eliminate pain, and spark a ripple effect of strength, healing, and purpose. When he's not throwing around a kettlebell or chasing after his kids, you might find him jamming at Live Loud headquarters to a curated playlist of OAR and a Mag and Dragon, or editing content late into the evening. Dr. Antonio, I'm so excited to dive into your story and the powerful impact of the Live Loud philosophy. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much.
So you and your wife, you run a chiropractic practice, Live Loud, with a whole person focus. Can you walk us through both of your different specialties?
Yeah, definitely. So we're super stoked. This is actually we're coming up to our 10th year in practice. We started our practice in 2015. My wife she always knew she wanted to be a chiropractor. She had been seeing chiropractic from a super young age. I was originally going to be a physical therapist. And just through the competitive nature of physical therapy school, I was waitlisted. And because I was waitlisted, I was like, okay, well, what do I want to do? So I moved out to California to just be closer to her and found out that chiropractic is very similar to PT. And that's really kind of how our style of practice is. It's much more movement-based focused as compared to many other traditional chiropractors, which they just do adjustments. We know the power of adjustments, super, super valuable. But we've also found that for most people with aches and pains or other issues, the combination of having soft tissue work and, more importantly, rehab and movement is a critical piece. And through the years, we've had a couple iterations. Our original practice was enhanced movements, very sporty. My wife, then we had our first kid in 2015. She found that there was a huge gap in prenatal and postnatal care. So we started a separate business called Gaia Health, which is tailored to just moms and babies. Mm-hmm. We did that separately, but in the same office for many years. And then we're like, why are we doing two different practices? So we rebranded to Live Loud 4 years ago now, to really just create that better family wellness model that is revolved around prenatal care, postnatal care, pediatric care, developmental milestone, primitive reflexes. That's her specialty. I help a lot in that category as well, just because she likes being at home with the kids a little bit more. We also homeschool. And so then on my subset is, kind of everybody else, but the dads, lower back pain, shoulder pain, your kind of general orthopedic musculoskeletal stuff. But again, all with a premise and emphasis on movement is such a critical piece to the puzzle that many people are just forgetting, or we're just kind of worried about, especially when it comes to like injuries.
Mm-hmm. I love how your practice has kind of evolved based on what you guys have been going through as like human beings. And,
Mm-hmm.
Your wife, like first time getting pregnant. Okay, now I know what other women are experiencing and how can I help them get through that? So that's cool to watch things kind of evolve based on what you guys have been doing.
Yeah, it's been a little bit of a whirlwind too, where you're always kind of like figuring out branding and all that. We're like, oh my gosh, we're switching again. But I feel like we've locked on something that works pretty well.
Mm-hmm. Well, once you have kids, you're kind of in that family space for a while. So I'm sure you guys can have a lot of great content around that. So
Definitely.
Today's episode is one I've been really looking forward to, and one that I believe we need more of an honest conversation about, which is men's health. So whether you're a guy starting to notice shifts in your metabolism, your joints are stiffer than you'd like, or you're simply wondering what's going on with your energy, hormones, or strength levels, I hope this episode resonates with you. So we're going to be talking about workouts, the pressure men can face every day, and yes, even the doctor avoidance that I feel like some men have. And it's a thing so that many guys feel comfortable around this space. So what do you feel like are some of the most common issues you see men dealing with in your practice?
Yeah. So again, we're very much like rehab biomechanists, help people with aches and pains. So the majority of what we see are obviously men dealing with aches and pains, joint issues, injuries from, muscle injuries, whatever that might be. And I would say a lot of it is there's kind of like what's interesting is being in such an active space and during, just talking with other people from other parts of the country, whether they're colleagues or anybody else, like, well, Boulder, Colorado, super active population. And we definitely are, at least Boulder County in this area. But what's interesting is we also have a lot of people that work in tech. And so I see two big things, right? We have the super active individual, whether it's triathlon training, CrossFit. And as we age, and rightfully so, I would love for us to maintain this certain level of competitiveness and athleticism. But I hear a lot of guys are like, I'm still trying to do what I was doing in high school, right? And they're pushing themselves. So they're trying to lift the weights that they were doing when they're either teenager or in their 20s, when they didn't have kids, they didn't have a full-time job, and they could eat as much as they maybe wanted to and not gain weight, or at the same time be able to sleep a ton, right? And so the recovery model is a lot different as we age, and the intention of how we do things, I think, needs to shift a little bit. Now, that's not saying that you can't be competitive and can't push yourself, but we forget that we need the recovery side of that portion. And so a lot of guys aren't either stretching to maintain their mobility, or they're not doing the necessary like small muscle groups that need to support heavy lifting. And we're seeing a lot of just overuse injuries. And this is I'm the guy who does this too, is we're stubborn about, no, it'll just work itself out, right? I've had this shoulder thing. I've had it for 20 years. It'll just work itself out. It always does. But it's the same story we've been saying for a long time. And so that's a big thing that we see. And so a lot of our conversations, at least for this particular individual, right, is I love doing things on a whiteboard, right? Let's write out, what are your goals? And for the majority of these guys, like, well, I just want to, be healthy and be strong, and you oftentimes still look good, which is great. I'm like, okay, well, within that, there's a lot of different ways we can get there. It doesn't have to be just this. We don't have to keep forcing ourselves into this one model that we've been doing that seems to just kind of recreating the same injuries. And so we really have to have sometimes these conversations around how do we remodel training and everything else for where you are in this phase of life. Now, sometimes kids go off to college, you have more free time and you can build that back up. And so there's so many factors that are involved with health and wellness and fitness that we try to take in consideration to ensure that we're still moving the needle forward, but not having this erratic journey of always having like injuries and just waiting, and really just kind of having less consistency with that, right? Then the other side of the spectrum is, because we have so many people that work in tech and work at a computer, a lot of guys just aren't moving enough, right? We have what does exercise look like for you? Well, I go on a couple walks a week, or I might walk on my lunch break, and I'm doing a lot of house and yard work. That's great. Those things need to be done, but that's not really fitness unless you're like doing landscaping, like, all that time, which is pretty good. But what we see is they don't do a lot, and then they try to work out hard 2 days a week, or they try to do like a whole bunch of landscaping, and then they hurt themselves because the hardest thing that they do is way down here, and then they all of a sudden have to do something else, and there's this massive gap in their capacity or their strength or their mobility, and then they have an injury, and they sometimes get surprised, and they're just like, well, all I did was just I just planted some things in my garden, or I just fixed X, Y, and Z. It wasn't a lot. Like, well, your body responded differently. Like your body told you that it was a lot, and so that's a super tough one, because when you're like, okay, well, I don't have a lot of time to work out. I was like, well, we got to find the time, because I can't remember. There's various sayings in this, right? But if you don't find the time now, you're going to find the time later. when there's an injury. And so our goal is to hopefully mitigate that. You don't have to take out a whole bunch of chunk of your time to deal with an injury. Let's try to make sure we're well balanced moving forward. And, there's definitely a subset of individuals that, I'll talk a little bit about my own personal journey with some of this too, is with all that is, it's just a prioritization. And I am 100% guilty of this. And this is something I'm constantly working on, is how do we prioritize the right things? Because many times, and this was a big shift and change for me when I started having kids, my emphasis and worry was on, now I have a family to provide for, which means my time, energy, and attention needs to be on that provision of being able to bring in money for the family, support the family, put them first type of things. And this as a parent, it's hard to balance those things out, to give yourself the time that you need, to give your spouse time that they also need, but then also give the time that you need for fitness, maybe hobbies, maybe relationships, all those different things. And we see a lot of guys that are also just really kind of burnt out. And so they're just like, I don't have the energy to work out. And we see this from, moms too. We got to give the love both ways, but that's a big thing, is just like, I don't know where to do it, because I also want to be able to be present and do these things, and taking an hour out of my day to go work out and do those things is super hard.
Yeah, it's almost like you have to schedule in those non-negotiables before you schedule anything else around your day. But it's also like an object in motion, like stays in motion, or what's the saying?
For sure.
If you've been sitting on a chair all day long, like, you're not going to feel motivated to go work out in the evening when you're home with your wife and kids.
Yep. And I mean, I love that saying, as I actually use that a lot. It's an object in motion stays in motion, right? Or utilizing momentum, right? And so it's very hard to get started, but once you do, it's easier. It's a lot easier to stay in motion once you're in motion. And it's a lot harder to just start all over if we're not. So, it's something as simple. Here's like first piece of tactical advice is micro breaks. Most of us don't take enough micro breaks at work. We're in meetings and we're doing all these things. And yes, I know the job constraints might dictate you can't do some of those things. If you have back-to-back Zoom meetings for 4 hours, which would really be tough and would suck in my opinion, but is like every 20 to 30 minutes, just get up and do 50 air squats, right? Get up and do a couple lunges, get up and do a couple push-ups, do a couple stretches, whatever that might be. We're just trying to break up the cycle of stagnation so that we just don't keep densifying and becoming tighter and tighter and tighter. And it doesn't have to be horribly complex. We're all of a sudden like, I don't know what to do. And, the example I give is like, well, if my elbow was in a cast and I just got it out of the cast, what's the shape of the elbow? Well, it's stuck in the shape of the cast.
Right.
What do they tell you to do?
Yeah, start slowly moving it around and
it's going to suck. It's going to hurt, but you keep doing it. It feels a little better. And then you can go a little further, and then I can add a little weight and resistance, but we just got to start with that. And then we can get a little bit more creative if we need to.
I like the visual that you created. Like, on average, you're down here when it comes to your movement and activity level. And then just a couple of times a week, you're way up here trying to do something heavy. And like that gap is killing you. Like, like trying to get your body to go from one extreme to another, especially because our cells inside of our bodies aren't as healthy as they once were when we were young. So.
For sure. Yeah. And the saying, in at least kind of like our rehab area, it's not the load that breaks you down. It's the load that you're unprepared for. Right. So oftentimes people are like, I get this so often. It's like, well, I was just doing light weight, but I still got hurt. I was like, well, your body felt that as heavy weight, or you were doing light weight, but you did like 100 reps, which if magnified 100 times, that can add up. And so this false notion of just lightweight, heavy or high reps is a better option it can be good, but we have to look at it like at a larger picture of, well, if we got injured, your body keeps the score. It's telling you that whatever you did, it didn't agree with, or you overloaded it. Regardless of what you think happened, it happened.
Coming from the men that you see inside your practice, as well as your own personal experience, like, at what age do men typically start noticing shifts in metabolism or energy? And sometimes what's happening hormonally, especially with things like testosterone beneath the surface?
Yeah. So again, we're not like, we have conversations around testosterone because it's something that I went through. And so I have a bit of experience and I can share my experience with that. But whenever there's hormone regulation, we always refer out to, in our opinion, nothing against endocrinologists if you have a great endocrinologist, but usually functional medicine or a naturopath, just because biasly that's like our angle and perspective of how we like approaching certain things, as opposed to just going on to like immediately to synthetic or something like that, right? And men in their 30s can start seeing a decline. 40s it starts to go a little bit more. 50s it starts to go a little bit more. Obviously, like that middle age is when both men and women do start to see changes in hormone. But we are starting to see a reduction in testosterone, even men in their 20s, and a lot of that is from what a lot of people believe is environmental factors. So toxins and different things like that. I actually just saw as I was perusing today when I should have been doing more of my notes, is some headlines that showed they're seeing microplastics even within sperm cells. And so like just plastics being everywhere can definitely be endocrine disruptors, right? We're seeing that from certain things that might have more estrogen in them, and when men are using it, and that can disrupt things as well. And so, I mean, I'm honestly not even taking my own advice, because even soda cans like this can have a plastic liner in it. So consuming things that have leached in, and that's one factor. And it's tough because we're like, how do you know? How do you know what things don't have this or do have this? And it takes a lot of research to figure that out. And it's going to honestly be a constant evolution thing as just more products and things are being created at the lowest and cheapest amount, right? And the other factor too, though, is obviously I listen to a variety of different podcasts, and this is a tough conversation because it's one that I feel like it's important, and obviously I think some of the listeners do as well. Is when you give attention to a certain group, it doesn't mean that we're taking attention from elsewhere. But I personally think there's a lot of stress for men and younger men in terms of this performance standpoint, right? Because we do live in America, and just by being in America, you're in the top whatever percentile of people in the world in terms of opportunity, which is great. And we can even argue, which this is not the focus of this, but argue in terms of race and other things like that, right? Aside from that, there is this pressure and sometimes expectation in terms of performance. And some of that too, which as I feel is just like, because I have this opportunity, if I'm not taking advantage of it, and not like in a bad way, but like taking advantage of my full potential and opportunity, then there's this like negative side to it, right? So it's always just like, well, I should be doing more. I could be doing more. And then there's just this kind of anxiety driven stress around that. That is for a lot of men creating a lot of lower testosterone as well, because we know that increased levels of cortisol from stress can also affect that as well. And so if I may, I just share my own personal experience. Is a couple years ago, I was killing my body. Like I've noticed, and maybe it's just age, maybe it's just kids, maybe it's just being a business owner, but and there's no fault of why I'm wearing a hat now, but like hair thinning out, that's definitely something that people would notice. For some, it might be low sex drive, it might be erectile dysfunction. Some are affecting muscle mass, increased body fat, fatigue and low energy is a big one. So the hair loss and growth, sometimes like sweating and things like that. And for some, it might actually be infertility, which is another whole conversation that we have on a different side of it. But for me, I was just overly stressed. I was, not being a good parent, handling situations with my family well, and just like expecting, like, I got to grow the business. I got to do more. I got to do all this. And it was and it was a little selfish centered in the sense of like trying to help the family from that perspective. But my wife could tell, she's just like, you're not doing well. You're overly stressed and all this. And then one day I was like, I didn't have a lot of energy. And I was like, why is my body all itchy? I got stress hives. All over my body, I started getting hives. And it was a big eye opener, and just from energy and mood and all this stuff. And then I got blood work done, which for those of you who feel like you might be having some of these things, super simple. Go get some blood work. It's really cheap. your provider can help you read the results. Nowadays, you can just take a screenshot of your results and put it into ChatGPT, and ChatGPT will tell you what's up. And I had high levels of cortisol, stress, low levels of testosterone, right? And there was some other things too.
Mm-hmm.
And so now what do we do about that? Right now, again, I can just share what I did. I can make some of these recommendations for people that are coming in, because I can give nutritional recommendation and supplement recommendations. But ultimately you have to also look at what's driving this, right? So one of the biggest things, right, is exercise. Exercise helps build testosterone, right? And short, intense bursts can help. My wife also read an interesting study that chopping wood has been shown to elevate testosterone, right?
Mm-hmm.
And not that I'm going to profile it, but kind of a super manly thing to do, is like most people would kind of assume. Now, there's a lot of females that chop wood too and are badass, so we're not saying that anybody can't do it, right?
But we have that visual from many, years and years ago, hundreds of years ago, men chopping wood. So
exactly, right? So that kind of like get your heart rate up workout, right? And now it doesn't have to only be HIIT training, because there's a balance in terms of what we want to be able to do. Sleep is a big one. I was staying up late, trying to what can we do for this? Or can I edit some videos and try to do all this? So I was staying up late, wasn't sleeping well. And then I was trying to still do all this stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
Diet's a big part of it. Is health. Cholesterol is an interesting thing, because we hear a lot of that cholesterol is bad for heart, right? And there's definitely, like, too much would obviously not be good. We do know those studies, but cholesterol is also a necessary component of hormones, right? So eggs and grass-fed beef and avocado, healthy oils and healthy forms of cholesterol are obviously super good.
Mm-hmm.
Cutting out the crap, nutrition, processed foods and sugar. And then a big one is alcohol, right? What do men are well known to be predisposed to more addiction. And for a lot of us that are overly stressed and not sleeping well, we were at a recent conference, and they talked about the spin, and this was me from like a caffeine standpoint. You're not sleeping well, you're overly stressed, hit that caffeine, right? So then you're trying to get yourself up, but then for some men, it's hard to bring yourself back down. And so for a lot of men, they then lower themselves down with alcohol to try to like calm things down, to then allow them to maybe sleep better, right? And you see this too with like Adderall and other, like, there's a lot of just uppers and downers. Well, now I gotta perform, but now I'm too revved up, so I gotta come down. And so we're seeing just a lot of just erratic natures, and that's really hard for hormones, right? And then the other thing that we talked about is reducing stress, which I'll give a subset point here in a moment. And then vitamin D, sunshine is obviously super helpful. Like, we're fortunate in Colorado where we do get a lot of that. But that being said, is like supplements, right? And well, I guess the other thing too is the hard part about it too. I think a lot of men are in a position when they're just not happy with life, right? And like, maybe you're younger, like, oh, I thought I wanted to do this, but I actually feel like that sucks. And now I kind of want to do this. And they struggle. Maybe they don't have a spouse or something, and they're kind of just in this limbo nature. And without a goal or a purpose, it's very easy. And especially men, we need purpose. We need something to drive for. When we're bored, it's not good.
Right. Well, I feel like the term midlife crisis probably came from something similar to that.
Yeah. And what's crazy is we're seeing those in younger, like not even midlife years, right? And people having, like, again, like people in their like 30s, kind of like me, or even younger, having a lot of that kind of crisis of just like, oh my gosh, I need to be able to do this, or I need to be able to figure this out. And it's okay to kind of still be unsure. And again, we're getting into like, is this even chiropractic care now? You know what I mean? But these are the conversations that we find, because it's the whole person, right? Is trying to figure out, I'm like, hey, well, I'm not a therapist. Can I just at least ask, like, what are some of the stressors that are going on right now? So I can help just maybe bring to light that there is something going on that I feel would be advantageous for you to figure out, right? And we even do this with, my wife does a lot with postpartum moms, because they get into a massive shift. We're like, well, I had a career before, but now I feel like I want to be a mom only, or I want to still do both. How do I do that? So she helps work through that and have conversations about like, well, how do we maybe have the best of both worlds, right? And so my learning experience, which I'm still learning through, is trying to be able to let go that a lot of things are out of my control. Right. I can control a lot. I can control what I put in my mouth. I can control exercise. I can control my habits and behaviors. Right. And we have the same conversation when people are struggling with this, but there's a lot out of my control that I get so worried about. And a lot of us do, men and women. And so the practice, which is still super hard for me, is being able to slow down and enjoy and actually feel, and being hopeful and setting goals for the future, but not also dwelling in the past of what I may or may not have done, and knowing that I've changed from those perspectives and trying to enjoy where I am right now. And that's the hard part. Is the question that I always ask myself is the where's the line between ambition and humility, of being really happy with where I am, but also still trying to like grow and pursue and push myself. And so for me, that turned into a spiral of having low testosterone and high cortisol. And that experience of doing psychedelic therapy really helped shift perspective. And then I combined that with making sure that I was reducing my toxins, reducing alcohol consumption, sleeping better, right? All the things that we just talked about to help really change the tides. In terms of supplements, zinc is great, magnesium is great, vitamin D, ashwagandha has been shown to be super helpful, boron, shilajit, and fenugreek. So we worked with a nutritionist friend that we had, and that was a kind of a protocol that she gave me. But even if you chat GPT again or Google, they can give you a lot of good recommendations. But I always encourage people to work with someone, especially if there's like a stress component to that, because all these things are helpful. But if we don't really deal with the root cause, and we say this, put shoulder pain in there. You could take you could take really good supplements to help with inflammation and all that stuff. But if you don't get to the root cause, you're just spinning yourself in circles.
You're just masking the issue instead of trying to get rid of it. That was all so good. Oh my goodness. There's a lot of information in there, but that was all really good.
Which stuff. Again, happy to share my experience. During the tail end of what I was doing for my podcast, because it went all over the place, I do have on our it's currently still on my YouTube. I go into more depth of all of those, they call them the journey experience, to give kind of a deep dive onto all those and whatnot. And it's one thing that I still recommend. It's not for everybody. It's definitely not for everybody, but for me, I found it to be super beneficial.
Well, I feel like for working parents, like you go into like the weekend and you're like, okay, next week I'm going to be more on it. I'm going to be more present with my kids. I'm going to be all of this. And then at 5 o'clock, I'm going to try my best to stop. And then Monday comes and you're like, my to-do list is so long this week. And you're like on a white mice on a wheel, just keep going and going. And, we all have these dreams and aspirations. And we want to provide financial, be financially independent and, provide for our families and be able to take everyone on all these great trips and do all these things and everything. But it's like your day to day, you're just killing yourself trying to do it. So,
yeah. And it's so, and I mean, these are the questions of life, right? That you can talk to an 8-year-old and they'll give you a perspective. You can talk to a 10-year-old, they'll give you a different perspective. And I think that's what's kind of cool about it. But also sometimes, one of my realizations after one of the last journeys was just like, I had this anxiety around like, well, I need to know how to do this, or I need to know what happens with this. And again, there's a lot out of my control. And I think if we approach things with curiosity, that's great. But when it comes from like, I need to know or something like that, especially when it's questions that you won't ever answer. And again, not getting into the depths of it, but, existential questions of religion and faith and different things like that, which can come up and be heavy for people. You just might not know. Right? Like, again, like your life could change tomorrow. Like I had a patient who's an ICU nurse. He crashed snowboarding, quadriplegic.
Wow. Yeah.
Just like that. And so it's just crazy. Like, there's so many things I'm worried about. Just don't matter. But it's okay. It's okay still to like, to
have goals and
it's a balance. And one thing that I forget too often is people underestimate what they can do in a year, but they overestimate what they can do in a day.
Oh yeah. That's a good way to put it.
right? So it's just like, okay, well, I want to do this and I'm so guilty of this. I try to do all these things in one day. And I'm like, well, shit, that didn't happen. Sorry, because is like, that didn't happen. So then it just rolls over and then it just like keeps compiling, as opposed to like you said, the to-do list is really trying to structure either time blocking or priorities of like, okay, well, I can't do everything in one day, but if I want to be here in whatever that time frame is, trying to reverse engineer that. And again, I'm my worst patient because I make all these suggestions and then I get so wrapped up in it as well. But that's the constant thing that we're just trying to, like, if you want to say optimize, is okay, well, if I want to be here, how do I break that down, right? If you want to lose 20 pounds, you're not going to lose 20 pounds in one day. So what strategies or habits can you do now that would allow you to hit that mark or as close as you can to that mark when you want it?
Okay, so that bridges, okay, I know I want to implement an exercise routine. So cardio or weights, how do you guide men in building a fitness routine that works with their bodies? I feel like now I'm hearing from a woman's perspective that cardio is killing you and you need to be focused on weights. So what's going on with the men?
Yeah. So never or, always and. Right.
Okay.
And so I think, like, especially when it comes to this day and age of social media, top three, and I'm guilty of having clickbait headlines too at times, right? Is top three things for this, or the best thing you're not doing, all these different things that make us assume that if we're not doing this, then you're doing it wrong, right? Now, for women, oftentimes it was like weight loss is cardio, right? But we do know that strength training is tremendously beneficial from so many standpoints, right? So the same is true for men, as we just indicated. Lifting weight and doing those things to increase testosterone is good, right? But yet at the same time, those that do a lot of quote unquote cardio, and it's not black and white, but I was chatting with someone else about this years ago who saw my podcast, and we were talking about running. It was kind of the same thing. And he's like, for people that run a lot, do you see a lot of runners that are heavy? Not too many, right?
Yeah.
Right. We're indicating that from a weight loss perspective, doing cardio still can be good, right? But it's like, okay, well, do you only need to do this, or do you only need to do this? It's not or, it's and. And so again, we look at, like, if I was to help someone else out and just like, okay, well, you want to be able to implement a exercise routine realistically based on you being, this is your job, and you have 3 kids and they're doing soccer and you're coaching one of their soccer teams, right? And then you also want to be able to do this. How many days a week do you realistically, or what days can we carve out time? Right. Let's just start with availability to get some sort of like minimal viable product. Right. I could only do Monday afternoon, Wednesday midday, and Friday. Perfect. Let's start with that to just get going. And then we can figure out how to like dive more into it or figure out more, right? Because what we always hear too is just like, if it's a priority, you'll find the time. I agree. And while we all have the same 24 hours, some of our 24 hours are just different, right? A single mom that does overnight shifts, I'm not going to say she has the same time as me. It's just not true. And right. And I really, that comment really rubs me the wrong way, because just in a different perspective. And it is what it is. And she'll be able to hypothetically, person we're making up on the spot, is get herself into a better situation. And it does require that. And so for someone who's wanting to get out of the situation, we might have to steal some things from other things if the health journey is the priority right now. So sometimes too, we'll put in like a priority list. What are the things that are super important to us? Where do we have the time? And that's why I love using a whiteboard, because it helps them see all the things going on in my head. And then we just kind of start structuring a minimal viable product, and then starting off super simple. I'm a big fan of Coach Dan John. A lot of times in weightlifting, there's basic movement patterns: squat, hinge, which is like a deadlift, a push, a pull, a lunge variation, and some sort of like a core or carry. So if you were to walk every day, is it the American? It's not American Health Association. Baseline
as 120 minutes or something.
Yeah, it's like, I think it's like 150 minutes of aerobic exercise a week, and then lifting, like, I think it's 2 days a week. It's 2 or 3. I can't remember what the actual standards are. So we kind of say, hey, if you could do 150 minutes of aerobic exercise, which would really fall underneath like cardio. Cardio can be, there's different metabolic systems. We don't need to like dive into all those, but like sprints versus like long distance, there's a range. That range is good. We want to be able to gear up and gear down, be able to go for long distances and be able to go for short distances, right? And then lifting 3 days a week. That's a pretty solid place to be in. You lock in your diet a little bit more. You focus on your sleep, your stress reduction, things like that. You can turn life around really well, and or applaud to those that are already doing it. You can maintain what you already have and not deteriorate. Sometimes maintenance is really good in terms of that. You got a lot of stuff going on in life and you're still holding strong and true. That's fantastic. And I've gone through certain phases of my life where I'm like, I need to check the box today. My kid's not sleeping. Like one of our kids had to get his tonsils out. So we were sleeping like horrible. And it's just like, I'm trying to check 3 to 4 days a week. I could do better on the cardio aspect, but I'm just trying to check the box and do those. And I'm doing pretty well. Now that I have some more time, I'm focusing on some of my aches and pains or my sticky spots and some of the things that I'm missing in terms of those gaps. But if you do a squat variation, a deadlift variation, so like for instance, goblet squats, kettlebell swings, push-ups, TRX row, farmer carries, and then maybe add another core or a lunge pattern or something like that. And you do 30 seconds on, 30 seconds off for 30 minutes, killer workout. Or you set a timer for 30 minutes and you do 10 reps of each and you just cycle through, right? Killer workout. You can make it challenging with a lot of just basic stuff.
How do you determine what's the right like weight that you should be using?
Yeah, great question. So it depends on the emphasis too, right? So I follow a lot. I'm having a kettlebell certification. I follow a lot of what Pavel Tsatsouline talks about with this, like a lot of Russian training modalities, and not getting into the specifics of this, but then there's like West Side Barbell and they do powerlifting. So it really kind of depends on A, the modality that you're doing, B, what's the goal and the intention of that as well. But for strength, we want to develop true strength. We should be aiming for 10 reps. So if I'm doing, let's just say back squats and I want to get stronger, no more than 10 reps. Right? That's the philosophy the model that I kind of follow, right? So that would be 5 sets of 2, 3 sets of 3, 10 sets of 1, but it's heavy and I give myself a lot of time to recover. Now I can still get stronger by doing lighter weight and doing more reps. Because if I was to do, let's just say 10 reps at 100 pounds, I've moved about 1,000 pounds, right? I could do 1,000 pounds at 1. I could do 10 pounds at 100 reps. It's not going to be the same stimulus because then I'm just going through, but we're kind of modeling is you can kind of hit that total volume accumulation and get similar results. But if we want to get strong, we got to do heavy weights, right? And the same holds true for women. Oftentimes we see this lightweight, high rep situation and they're like, I'm not progressing. I'm kind of staying same. I'm like, are you like, is there ever a time when you're lifting where you're grunting? You're like, what? I'm like,
right, like, where that like 11th rep would kind of like, do you
so like a tough at 10 is a great model, right? Or we talk about like an RPE, a 7 to 10 or a 7 or 8 out of 10 RPE, rate of perceived exertion. If a 10 out of 10 would be a 1, like I can't do any more. Where an 8 is like, all right, well, I did 8 and I maybe have about 2 reps in reserve. Like that's where we're hitting that zone of adaptation of making some good strength gains, right? Now, if you were to talk to like, if you want to do bodybuilding, that's kind of a different approach. That's not what I do or what I talk about. We kind of like doing more full body functional training. I know it's a buzzwordy term, but trying to get people like, I want you to pick a weight that by like your 3 sets of 10, you're grunting. You got a little, you got to lean in, you got to push into it. If you're doing that and you're like, checking your phone afterwards and you're just kind of there, I'm like, I don't think we're making the adaptation that we need. Right. And so that's kind of how we view and look at it in terms of like exercise selection. And then you test it and you're like, hey, that was pretty easy today. Next time I'm going to jump up. And then you kind of just keep finding that sweet spot.
Yeah. I do want to bring up one more thing, because you and I talked about this before we even started recording, but it's many men are lacking meaningful community, especially once they hit their 30s or 40s. What would you say are the health consequences of that, and what can be done?
Yeah, and this is uh, so in terms of longevity, which is kind of a big thing nowadays. We know relationships and intentional communities is probably one, I think it's the number one thing that people have that live long, right?
Mm-hmm.
So from right there, right, above exercise is high up on there too, right? So imagine combining those. That's great. Obviously, diet's up there, but intentional community and relationships is important. So I'm in a unique position where while it's not maybe an intimate relationship with like a really good friend or something like that, I see and I work with people every day, right? So I'm
Mm-hmm.
building relationships constantly, right? Now I know for me personally, and one of my goals for this year was develop me more intentional community with men that are in similar age stage of life, that share my values, so that we can, as they say, iron sharpens iron, rub off on each other, right? And so you have the ability to talk with other people about certain things that are going on, so that you don't ruminate in your own head. That's a huge benefit, right? Or I'm like, hey, I'm struggling with this. What are you guys doing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or like, man, I'm struggling with my diet. Like, how do you look like you're strong, man? What are you doing, right? Oh, I'm going to this gym. You should come with me, and I'm trying to do this new. I don't care if it's a diet, fad, workout, whatever. It's just like just finding other people that are trying to go in the same direction as you, that you can go along with. And I'll be honest, like there was that phase where I just talked about. I was in my own head, I was in my own space, and I wasn't doing that as much. And so it's trying to also then, even though you might not feel that you have that, is being useful to others, right? Is
Mm-hmm.
just like being there and showing up is helpful for other men, because then, he might not. I feel like I don't have it together, but he says he doesn't have it together. All right, well, we might be able to figure this out together. Maybe, who knows? You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? But from a longevity perspective, that's super good. So I think that's why certain gyms do so well, like CrossFit gyms. CrossFit was built on community, right? The workouts are obviously great, but CrossFit was built on community. And that's what CrossFit did so well. So whether it's CrossFit, group fitness classes are absolutely fantastic. Ones that go outside in the park, stroller striders for moms, all those
Mm-hmm.
things are so great, because you're going through life with people in the exact kind of phase of life, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
And then obviously you could volunteer your time and other things like that. But in terms of that is huge. And I haven't like officially announced it yet, just because I don't want to. I want to be able to keep my promises. But like my hopes too is, again, Dan John, strength coach that I'm a big fan of. He holds a free workout every day at his house at 9:30. If you're
Mm-hmm.
traveling around the world and I don't remember what city in Utah he lives in, but if you're around, I'm working out at 9:30 every day. If he's like, if I'm local. And
Mm-hmm.
so it builds this intentional community of everyone else around who wants to come do it. So
And
I'm
it's just
coaching my.
live. He does it
It's not.
live,
He
or
does. He doesn't. He doesn't record it or anything. So if you're local, you can come do it. So it's
okay.
not like, I think he might have done. I think he did it live during COVID.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but I'm coaching my daughter's soccer team right now, so I do have soccer obligations Saturday morning. But I want to start running a similar thing at our house, which is right in Erie. Is just a similar thing where it's going to be early, like 6 a.m. early, because
Mm-hmm.
then I can usually coach soccer at like 8, of just a free workout. Right, because it's important to us. That'll get my butt out early too, and for those that are interested. So maybe this will be just the kicker we need to just launch it and say it's live.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Yeah, that sounds like so much fun. I feel like that community aspect is so important. I mean, we hear about it like on blue zones and all that kind of stuff. People just,
Mm-hmm.
reintroducing the fact that like community is such an important aspect of our lives and our overall well-being. For the guy who's feeling worn out, who might be gaining weight and a bit disconnected, what's one small but powerful step you'd recommend to take today?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think that kind of spins off of like that whole story about how we might help a guy, like that whole whiteboard situation, right? So there's a lot of factors involved, right? But I'll share a story. And granted, he came in on his own volition of trying to change his life. We had a patient coming in, by definition, morbidly obese, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is a tech guy, and he wanted to start just working on himself so that he can start a family with his wife. Right. And we didn't go into details if he had fertility issues. Right. But like in this situation, for someone who's feeling worn out and gaining weight, is first and foremost, which is something that was always asked to me, of like, pick a goal.
Right.
Just one goal, right? Not more goals. I want to be able to do this, and this. Pick one goal. And Jordan Peterson talks about this a lot too, is picking an obtainable goal. Often, I want to be I want to be a CEO of a multi-million-dollar company. Great. But if you don't even have a company right now, that's too far of a gap, right? If you want to lose weight, I want to lose 100 pounds. Great. Too far of a gap. I want to lose 10 pounds. Perfect. How do we do that? Right. So finding an attainable goal, like you said, momentum of body in motion stays in motion, because if you set it too far ahead of yourself, right, and you don't reach it, then oftentimes you get discouraged. Right. And so if it's someone who's maybe gaining weight, it might be a weight loss thing. Right. But in some of those situations too, the easier option might be, don't worry about the weight loss. How do we form a better habit structure? Right. I want you, and this was the conversation we had with this gentleman. We didn't even talk about a weight loss goal, because he's like, it doesn't even seem like a fathomable number when you're so beyond something. Right. And I'm like, because he's like, well, I walk once a week. I do the elliptical twice a week, and that's it. But he was doing nothing before. I was like, that's it, man. That's great. Now, do you hurt after you walk or anything? It's like, no. I'm like, okay, well, do you think you could walk every day? Yeah. That's his goal, right? And so it's just starting off with that. So for many of us, it usually starts off with, I don't need you working out 3 times a week if you've never been doing it. Well, I want you doing that. I want you walking 1 day a week, and I want you doing micro breaks throughout your day, so you're not sitting for 6 hours straight and then slamming a soda for energy for the afternoon, right? And so we're trying to figure out just a few of those just minimal viable options to start with. And then once you do that consistently, then we can take it to the next level. And then we can take it to the next level. Because if I start rattling off, okay, I want you doing 3 times a week. I want you doing these exercises. I don't have weights. Okay, we need to get a gym membership. Now they're overwhelmed. There's way too many things to think about. So for that individual, let's pick an easy goal. What's that first easy goal that we can do? Maybe it's relationship, maybe it's finances, maybe it's your health. A lot of different areas to choose from, and focus just on one thing. This is a reminder to myself. Focus on one thing. And then once you get to that thing, build off of that. And then once you have momentum there, then you can start looking at other areas too.
Right. It's almost like you need to start asking people, okay, like what, it's great to know like what your end goal is, but like, what is your weekly goal this week? And just stick and stay focused on that, so that you're not, keeping it, within a certain like frame of like what you need to be focusing on during these next 5 days, instead of trying to really go at it like you have to solve all the world's problems in one night,
Yeah. Well, my wife Nichelle is so good at this. I mean, we've done a lot of like those personality assessments over the years too. I'm a I'm shoot first, aim second. So she comes up with an idea, let's go, and she's like, hold on, I'm just brainstorming, right? So it's very easy for me to start just implementing all of these new things without really like, is this really part of the big picture that we want right now, right?
Yeah.
And so that's an important component too, of also just kind of knowing yourself. And sometimes those things are helpful, where you might feel like you are more of a strategist. And so your goal might be, okay, well, rather than us, like you're taking action, might be us setting up another appointment and you helping me in the whole strategy situation of this. So rather than someone telling you what to do, you're telling yourself what to do, right? And so there's a lot of different angles, but obviously, like I'm a big fan of live loud, and movement is just like, we need some action. And for a lot of people that are feeling worn out, gaining weight, or stuck, is we need some action.
Absolutely. Well, Dr. Antonio, thank you so much for today's conversation. I really hope that the listeners got a lot out of it. I feel like from just a big holistic overall person perspective of wellness to hopefully the men that listen to this episode will relate to you and what you were sharing and feel some inspiration to make some changes in their own lives. So thank you again for your time today.
Thanks for having me. This was a blast. I love it.
That's a wrap for today's episode. Thank you so much for listening to the Erie Wellness Podcast. I truly appreciate you being a part of this journey. If you loved today's conversation, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with a friend. For more daily wellness inspiration and behind-the-scenes content, be sure to follow me on Instagram at the Erie Wellness Podcast. I can't wait to connect with you again soon.